Earth sent its oldest warship into alien space. It returned with a secret nobody believed. The old ship sat in the dark like a tired giant. Its hull was gray and scratched, covered in patches from 100 small repairs. Its name was painted near the front, in letters that had faded almost to nothing: ISS Endeavour. It had been built almost 60 years ago, back when humanity had just learned how to jump between stars. Since then, it had fought in 3 wars, survived 2 engine fires, and outlived every other ship from its generation. Now it sat in a quiet dock above Earth, waiting to be taken apart for scrap. Nobody thought the Endeavour would ever fly again. It was too old. Its weapons were weak compared to the new fleet ships. Its computer core ran on code that most young engineers could not even read anymore. The only people who still cared about it were a few old officers who had served on it long ago, and one stubborn engineer named Mira Voss, who visited it every week just to keep its systems from rusting shut. That was how things stood, until the day the message came from High Command. Admiral Renata Cole read the message twice before she believed it. She was the head of Earth's defense fleet, a woman with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too many battles. She sat alone in her office, staring at the screen, feeling a cold weight settle into her chest. The message was simple. An alien empire called the Visagi Dominion had sent a warning through a neutral trade route. They said that Earth's territory bordered a region of space they called the Silence, and that if any Earth ship entered that region, the Dominion would consider it an act of war. They gave no reason. They only said that no one who entered the Silence ever returned, and that Earth should be grateful for the warning. Renata frowned at the screen. Humanity had only made contact with alien life 8 years ago. Since then, 3 different empires had been discovered nearby, all more advanced than Earth, all with bigger fleets and older technology. The Visagi Dominion was the strongest of the 3, and until now, they had mostly ignored humanity, treating Earth like a small, unimportant colony of primitive apes who had gotten lucky with warp drives. This warning was different. It was the first time the Dominion had spoken directly to Earth about anything. Renata called a meeting with her top staff that same night. In the room were General Okafor, who ran ground defense, Dr. Lena Park, the head of Earth's Science Division, and Captain Idris Shaw, the fleet's best combat pilot. They sat around a table under a soft white light, looking at a star map that showed the region called the Silence, a patch of space near the edge of Dominion territory, marked with a red circle. "It doesn't make sense," said Dr. Park. "Why would they warn us about a region that has nothing to do with us? We don't even have ships that can travel that far." "Maybe they think we might," said General Okafor. "Or maybe someone else told them we were getting close to something out there." Renata shook her head. "There is another possibility. Maybe this is not a warning. Maybe it's bait." The room went quiet. Captain Shaw leaned forward. "Bait for what?" "Think about it," Renata said. "The Dominion has ignored us for 8 years. They see us as harmless children. Now, suddenly, they send us a formal warning about a region we've never even heard of. Why would they bother, unless they wanted us to go looking?" Dr. Park frowned. "You think they want us to send a ship into the Silence?" "I think," Renata said slowly, "that something in that region matters to them very much. And I think they are testing us. Or studying us. Or maybe they are afraid of something out there, and they want to see if we're foolish enough to walk into it." Captain Shaw crossed his arms. "So what do we do? Ignore it? Send nothing and hope they leave us alone?" "No," Renata said. "We send something, but not one of our real warships. If this is a trap, I won't lose one of our best crews and best ships. If this is a test, I want to send something that tells them exactly what we think of their little game." Dr. Park's eyes went wide. "You don't mean—" "The Endeavour," Renata said. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then General Okafor laughed, a short, surprised bark. "The Endeavour is 60 years old. It barely holds together. You want to send that thing into hostile alien space?" "I want to send a message," Renata said. "If the Dominion is trying to scare us, I will not scare easily. I will send them our oldest ship, flown by our own choice, into space they claim is forbidden. If nothing happens, we learn something. If something happens, we lose an old ship that was going to be scrapped anyway, and no one we love dies for it." "And if it comes back?" Dr. Park asked quietly. Renata looked at the star map for a long moment. Then we'll have our answer. Whatever it is. Word spread fast through Earth's Fleet Command, and within 2 days, a plan had formed. The Endeavour would not go undefended or unmanned. It needed a crew, small but skilled, willing to fly deep into alien territory with almost no support behind them. Volunteers were called for, and the list of names that came back surprised everyone. The first name on that list was Captain Idris Shaw himself. Renata called him into her office and looked at him hard. "You're the best pilot we have. I need you flying fleet ships, not throwing your life away on an old scrap heap." "With respect, Admiral," Shaw said, "if you're going to send a message to the Dominion, it should be flown by someone who can actually survive long enough to deliver it. I've flown worse ships in worse places." Renata studied him. Shaw was 34 years old, born on a colony station near Mars, and he had grown up hearing stories about the old wars on Earth before the first alien contact. Wars fought over oil and land and pride, back when humanity thought it was alone in the universe. He had joined the fleet at 18 and had never lost a ship under his command, not once, in 16 years of service. "All right," Renata said finally, "you'll command, but I want the ship refitted properly first. No half measures." That task fell to Mira Voss, the engineer who had never stopped caring for the Endeavour. When she got the message that the ship had been chosen for a real mission, she did not celebrate. She sat down in the corner of the docking bay and cried for almost 10 minutes, the kind of crying that comes from relief and fear mixed together. Then she got up, wiped her face, and got to work. Mira was 39, small and quick, with short black hair and hands covered in the fine scars that came from working on old machines for 20 years. She had grown up on a farm in what used to be called Kansas, in the middle of the old United States, and had come to the fleet not out of dreams of adventure, but because she loved understanding how things worked. She understood the Endeavour better than anyone alive. She knew every wire, every panel, every strange creak in its old bones. Over the next 3 weeks, Mira led a team of engineers who worked almost without sleep, replacing the ship's old weapon systems with the newest equipment available, patching its hull, rebuilding its engines piece by piece. They could not make the Endeavour into a new ship. It was too old for that, its bones too worn. But they could make it strong enough to survive, and fast enough to run if it had to. The crew that would fly with Shaw and Mira was small, only 12 people total, chosen not for fame or rank, but for skill and toughness. Among them was a young communications officer named Tomas Reyes, barely 23 years old, who had grown up listening to old radio signals as a hobby, and could pick a whisper out of static better than anyone in the fleet. There was also Dr. Amara Nwosu, a medic who had served on 3 different combat ships, and had never once panicked under fire. And there was an old weapons officer, a man named Grigor Petrov, who had fought in humanity's first small skirmish with pirates near Jupiter, 20 years before the aliens were even discovered. The night before launch, Renata visited the ship personally. She walked through its narrow gray halls, touching the walls with her hand, remembering the years when she herself had served on a ship just like it, back before the fleet grew large and shiny and modern. She found Shaw in the command chair, staring at the star charts. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I can still find someone else." "No, you can't," Shaw said, smiling slightly. "Nobody else wants to fly an old ghost ship into a graveyard. That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be." Shaw turned to look at her. "Admiral, can I ask you something honestly?" "Go ahead. Do you think we're going to die out there?" Renata was quiet for a long moment. "I think," she said, "that the universe just told us to be afraid, and I don't like being told what to feel. I think you're going in there because someone has to, and because the Endeavour deserves one more flight before we cut it apart for metal. And I think, whatever you find, Earth needs to know the truth of it." Shaw nodded slowly. "Then we'll find it." At dawn the next day, without any fanfare, without cameras or crowds, the ISS Endeavour pulled away from its dock and turned its nose toward the dark edge of known space. Its engines, old but freshly repaired, hummed with a sound like a great animal waking up after a long sleep. Inside, 12 people sat quietly at their stations, watching Earth shrink behind them into a small blue dot. The trip to the border of Dominion space took 9 days. During that time, the crew settled into a rhythm, running drills, checking systems, telling stories to pass the long hours. Thomas Reyes spent much of his free time listening to distant signals, hoping to catch any hint of what waited ahead. Grigor Petrov taught two of the younger crew members how to play an old card game from his childhood. Dr. Nwosu kept everyone's spirits up with terrible jokes that made people groan more than laugh. Mira Voss barely left engineering. She talked to the ship's old engines like they were living things, coaxing more power out of them with small adjustments here and there. Late one night, Shaw found her sitting on the floor of the engine room, leaning against a wall, staring at the humming machinery. "You should rest," he said. "I'm listening," she said. "This old girl has flown longer than most of the crew has been alive. She's earned someone paying attention to her." Shaw sat down beside her. "Do you think she'll hold together, out there?" Mira was quiet for a moment. "She's held together through worse than this. I just hope whatever we find out there is worse than her, and not worse than us." On the 10th day, they crossed into the edge of what the Dominion called the Silence. The change was immediate and strange. Every sensor on the ship went quiet at once, as if some great hand had reached out and smothered them. Tomas Reyes stared at his console in confusion. "Captain, I'm reading nothing. No stars, no background radiation. It's like space itself has gone silent." Shaw leaned forward in his chair, frowning at the black emptiness on the main screen. There should have been distant stars, faint points of light even at this distance. Instead, there was only darkness, deep and total, like staring into a closed eye. "Mira," Shaw said into the comm, "check the engines. Make sure we're still moving." A moment later, her voice came back, tight with tension. "Engines are fine, Captain. We're still under power. But something's wrong with the readings. I don't understand it." Grigor Petrov, at the weapons station, spoke quietly. "Captain, I don't like this." "Neither do I," Shaw admitted. "But we came this far. Steady on course." The Endeavour moved deeper into the black, its old engines glowing faintly in a darkness that swallowed even the light of distant suns, carrying 12 human souls into a silence that no one had ever returned from before. Behind them, Earth waited, not knowing that the answer to the Dominion's warning, and to a secret far larger than anyone imagined, was about to be found by an old ship that everyone had once thought was worthless. None of them yet understood that what waited in the silence was not simply an enemy, or a trap, or an empty stretch of space. It was something far stranger, something that would change the way humanity saw itself, and the galaxy around it, forever. But for now, the Endeavour simply moved forward, alone, into the dark, its old heart beating steady beneath the silence, carrying 12 people who had chosen, of their own will, to walk into the unknown, so that others would not have to. Back on Earth, 3 days after the Endeavour's launch, Admiral Renata Cole sat in a small, dimly lit control room, watching a screen that showed nothing but a single blinking dot, the last confirmed position of the ship, before it crossed into Dominion-claimed space. After that point, all contact would be lost. There was no way to send a signal fast enough across that distance, no way to know what was happening to the crew, until the ship either returned or did not. She thought about Shaw's question from the night before launch. "Do you think we're going to die out there?" She had given him an answer meant to comfort, but privately, she did not know. She had authorized this mission herself, had chosen the ship, had chosen not to risk one of the fleet's real warships. It was a decision built from logic, but logic did not make it easier to sit and wait. General Okafor found her there late that night, still staring at the dot that no longer moved. "You should go home," he said. "There's nothing more to see tonight." "I keep thinking about the message," Renata said. "The Dominion warned us, unprompted, about a place we had never even heard of. They didn't need to say anything at all. We would never have found the silence on our own, not for decades. So why tell us?" Okafor sat down across from her. "Maybe they wanted to see what we'd do. Test our nerve. Or maybe," Renata said, "they wanted us to send exactly what we sent. An old, unimportant ship, easy to lose, easy to dismiss if it never came back. Maybe this is exactly the outcome they hoped for. Then we've already lost the game before it started." Renata shook her head slowly. "Or we've already won it, by refusing to send anything that mattered to us. Either way, Idris Shaw and his people are the ones who will find out first." Meanwhile, aboard the Endeavour, The days leading up to the border crossing had not been entirely quiet. On the 6th day of the journey, the ship's old sensors picked up a faint signal drifting through open space, far off their planned course. Tomas Reyes noticed it first, a weak, repeating pulse buried in background noise that any newer, more modern sensor array would likely have filtered out as junk. "Captain, I've got something," he said, adjusting his headset. "It's faint, but it's structured. Not natural, repeating every 11 seconds. Shaw walked over to his station. "Can you clean it up? Give me a few minutes." While Tomas worked, Grigor Petrov leaned back in his chair at the weapons station and frowned. Might be nothing. Old debris, drifting equipment, could be anything. Or it could be a distress call, Dr. Nwosu said from the medical station near the back of the bridge. 11 seconds is a strange pattern for junk to make on its own. After 20 minutes, Tomas managed to isolate the signal enough to make out its shape. It wasn't a voice, and it wasn't any language the ship's translation systems recognized. It was a simple mathematical pattern, the kind of thing built to say one basic message across any species. "I am here. I am alive. Please listen." "It's definitely intelligent," Tomas said quietly. "Somebody's out there, or somebody was." Shaw considered their orders. They were not meant to stop for anything before reaching the silence, but leaving a possible survivor behind, alone in empty space, was not something easy to simply pass by. "Where's it coming from?" he asked. Tomas checked his readings. "Small drift, about 2 hours off our current course. It would cost us time, but not much." Shaw looked around the bridge at his crew. 12 faces, all watching him, waiting. "We're already flying into more danger than any of us fully understand," he said. "But I'm not in the business of ignoring a call for help, not when it costs us 2 hours out of 9 days. Change course, let's see what's out there." The Endeavour turned gently off its planned path, engines glowing steady as it moved toward the source of the signal. 2 hours later, the crew found a small, badly damaged escape pod, tumbling slowly through space, its outer hull scorched black in places, clearly the result of some kind of battle or accident long past. Dr. Nwosu and 2 crew members suited up and crossed over in a small shuttle to investigate. Inside the pod, they found no aliens, no bodies, only an old, simple recording device, still faintly broadcasting its signal on a loop, its actual message long since corrupted beyond understanding. Whatever species had built it, whatever story it once carried, had been lost to time and damage. "It's just an echo," Nwosu reported back to the bridge. "Whoever sent this has probably been gone a very long time." Shaw nodded slowly, a strange feeling settling over him. "Bring the device aboard anyway. Maybe our people back home can learn something from it." As they resumed course toward the silence, Grigor Petrov spoke quietly to Shaw. "You know what that was, don't you, Captain?" "What do you mean?" "A warning," Grigor said. "Something out here fought, and lost, a long time ago. Maybe more than one something. We're not the first to come poking around in the dark like this." Shaw said nothing, but the words stayed with him as the ship continued forward, the small salvage device sitting quietly in a storage locker, still pulsing its silent, unanswered message into a universe that had long since stopped listening. The remaining days of the journey passed with a strange, heavy quiet settling over the crew, the small delay and the ghostly signal weighing on everyone's mind even as they tried to keep to their normal routines. Mira Voss spent long hours running diagnostics on every system twice over, unwilling to trust that anything on the old ship was truly as solid as it seemed. Tomas Reyes kept a careful log of every strange signal, every faint anomaly the sensors picked up, filling notebook after notebook with careful notes in his neat handwriting, determined that if the Endeavour never made it home, at least a record of what they found would. On the 9th night, before the crossing, Shaw gathered the crew together in the ship's small mess hall, 12 people crowded around metal tables, built for a crew twice their size. He did not give a grand speech. He simply looked around at each of them, one by one. "Tomorrow we cross into the silence," he said. "I won't pretend I know what's waiting for us. I won't pretend this ship is anything more than an old machine that most people wanted thrown away. But I chose each of you because I trust you, and because I believe, whatever's out there, we can face it and bring the truth of it home." Grigor Petrov raised his cup of recycled coffee. "To the old girl," he said, nodding toward the walls around them. May she carry us as far as we need to go, and bring us all the way back. The others raised their cups in return, a quiet small toast in a quiet small room. 12 people bound together by choice and duty, preparing to cross into a darkness that no one before them had ever returned from. The next morning, the Endeavor's engines pushed it steadily forward, past the last marker buoy at the edge of known space, into the region the Dominion called the Silence, where all light and sound seemed to vanish, and where something ancient, patient, and unseen had already begun to notice the small, stubborn spark of light that dared to enter its domain. Inside the Silence, the darkness did not feel like ordinary space. Captain Idris Shaw had flown through empty stretches of the galaxy before, places far from any star, where the black stretched endless in every direction. But even in those places, there had always been something, a distant point of light, a whisper of background radiation, some proof that the universe was still there, still working the way it should. Here, there was nothing. The main screen on the bridge showed only flat black, as if someone had painted over the windows. "Sensors still reading nothing?" Shaw asked. Tomas Reyes shook his head, frustration clear on his young face. "Nothing, Captain. It's not that the sensors are broken, it's like there's nothing out there to detect. No stars, no dust, no background noise. Even our own engine trail isn't showing up right." Grigor Petrov frowned at his weapons console. "That's not natural. Something is doing this." Mira Voss's voice came over the comm from engineering. "Captain, the engines are running fine, but I'm seeing strange readings in the ship's outer hull sensors. It's like something is passing very close to us, over and over, but never touching." Shaw felt a chill despite the warm air of the bridge. "Define close." "Close enough that if it were solid, we'd have hit it already," Mira said. "But there's no impact, no debris. Whatever it is, it's either not solid, or it's moving around us on purpose." The crew sat in tense silence as the Endeavor pushed forward, deeper into the black. Dr. Amara Nwosu kept glancing at the medical scanners, watching heart rates climb slightly across the crew, the natural response of human bodies, sensing danger, even when the mind could not explain why. 2 hours into the Silence, the ship's lights flickered, just once, and every screen on the bridge went black for 3 full seconds before returning to normal. When the screens came back, Tomas Reyes let out a small, sharp breath. "Captain, I've got something. A shape, close range, disappearing again as fast as it showed up." "Show me," Shaw said. The screen displayed a brief recording, half a second long, showing a long, curved shape sliding past the edge of their sensor range, easily 3 times the size of the Endeavor, its surface dark and featureless, reflecting no light at all. "That's not a rock," Grigor muttered. "That's a ship." "Or something built to look like one," Dr. Nwosu added quietly. Shaw stood from his chair, walking closer to the main screen, as if that might somehow help him see more. "Options. Talk to me." "We could try broadcasting a greeting," Tomas offered. "Standard first contact protocol. Let them know we're not a threat." "Or we power down non-essential systems and go quiet ourselves," Grigor said. "Whatever that thing is, if it hasn't attacked yet, maybe it hasn't fully noticed us." Mira's voice crackled over the comm again. "Captain, I don't think going quiet will help. If it can sense our engines even at this distance, turning off our lights won't hide us." Shaw considered the 2 options for a long moment. Then he made his choice. "Reyes, prepare a simple greeting signal. Basic mathematics, prime numbers, the standard first contact package we used with the Dominion originally. If something is out there, I'd rather it know we came in peace than think we're trying to sneak past it." Tomas worked quickly, and within a few minutes, the Endeavor began broadcasting a slow, careful pulse of information into the dark, a message built from numbers and simple shapes, that any species advanced enough to notice them should be able to understand. For a long, tense stretch of time, nothing happened. The crew waited, watching their screens, listening to the quiet hum of the ship's old engines. Then, all at once, every system on the Endeavor lit up with an incoming transmission. It was not words. It was not sound in any form the crew's translators recognized right away. Instead, it came through as a kind of pressure, a strange feeling that pressed against the edges of the mind, as if something enormous and old was trying to speak in a language built for a very different kind of listener. Dr. Nwosu gasped. gripping the edge of her console. "Captain, everyone's vitals just spiked. That transmission is doing something to us." "Reyes, cut the connection," Shaw ordered. "Trying, sir. It's not responding to normal channels." Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure faded, and the ship's systems returned to normal. The crew sat in stunned silence, breathing hard, several of them pale and shaken. "What in the world was that?" Grigor said, rubbing his temples. Tomas checked his console with shaking hands. I think it was trying to translate itself into something we could understand, using our own greeting as a base. It might not have meant to hurt us. It might just not understand how fragile we are." Shaw looked around at his crew, making sure everyone was still steady, before turning back to the screen. "Try again. Slower this time. Reyes, adjust the translation protocols. See if you can build something gentler." It took almost 30 minutes of careful, patient signal exchange, testing different formats, before something resembling real communication began to form. The messages that came through were fragmented, strange, built more from concepts and feelings than clear words, but slowly, a picture began to take shape in the minds of the crew. The being, or beings, communicating with them called themselves, in the closest translation the ship's systems could manage, the Hollow. They did not speak of themselves as a single creature or a fleet of ships, but as something older and stranger, a presence that had existed in this region of space for a very long time, long before even the Dominion had claimed the surrounding stars. "They're not attacking us," Tomas said, watching the slow stream of translated concepts scroll across his screen. I think they're studying us, the same way we might study something new we found." "Ask them why the Dominion warned us away from this place," Shaw said. Tomas worked at his console for several minutes, carefully building the question from the strange shared vocabulary they had built. The response, when it came, took even longer to translate, and left the bridge in stunned silence when it finally resolved into something close to plain language. The Dominion did not warn Earth away from the silence because they feared for humanity's safety. They warned Earth away because they did not want humanity to learn what the Dominion themselves had done here, decades ago, in a war that the wider galaxy no longer remembered, or was no longer allowed to speak of. "What war?" Shaw asked quietly, almost to himself. The Hollow's answer came slowly, piece by piece, over the following hour, translated by Tomas with painstaking care. Long before humanity had discovered space travel, the Dominion had fought a war against another empire, a species called the Threll, who had once controlled this region of space. The war had been long and brutal, and near its end, the Dominion had done something terrible to ensure their victory, something involving this very region, something that had left it permanently changed, silent, and haunted by whatever remained of a species that no longer existed anywhere else in the galaxy. "They wiped them out," Grigor said quietly, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "The Threll. The Dominion erased them completely." The Hollow's next message confirmed this, in its strange, fragmented way. But it added something more, something the crew had not expected. Not everything of the Threll had been destroyed. Something had survived, hidden deep within this silent region, protected by the very same strange energy that blocked sensors and light and sound. And the Hollow, whatever it truly was, seemed to be connected to that survival somehow, though the translation was too unclear to say exactly how. "Ask them," Shaw said slowly, choosing his words with care, "if there's something here that the Dominion is afraid we might find." The response this time came almost instantly, a single, clear concept that needed almost no interpretation at all. "Yes." The bridge fell silent. Mira's voice came over the comm, tense and quiet. "Captain, I'm reading a change in the ship's exterior sensors again. Whatever's out there, it's moving. It feels like it's guiding us somewhere." Shaw looked at the dark, empty screen in front of him, at the endless black that had swallowed every star and every light since they entered this place. He thought about Renata's words before they left Earth. "Whatever we find, Earth needs to know the truth of it." "Reyes, tell them we want to understand," Shaw said. "Tell them we came in peace, and we're not looking to cause harm. Ask them to show us." The response, when it came, was simple and strange, translated by Tomas, in words that would follow the crew of the Endeavor for the rest of their lives. "Then come, small light. See what your masters do not wish you to see. The ship's old engines shuddered slightly as an unseen force gently redirected their course, the Endeavour drifting deeper into the black heart of the silence, guided now not by its own navigation systems, but by something ancient and unseen that had chosen, for reasons the crew did not yet understand, to let them come closer to a secret that had been buried for decades. Grigor Petrov gripped the edge of his console, watching the readings shift on his screen. "Captain, whatever's guiding us, it could be leading us into a trap." "I know," Shaw said quietly, "but we didn't come all this way to turn back now." Dr. Nwosu spoke up from the back of the bridge, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "For what it's worth, Captain, if this is a trap, it's the strangest one I've ever heard of. Most traps don't warn you they're a trap before springing shut." Shaw allowed himself a small, tired smile at that. "Let's hope you're right, Doctor." The ship moved on through the dark for several more hours, the crew watching in tense silence, as faint shapes occasionally flickered at the edge of their sensors, always vanishing before they could be properly studied. Mira Voss remained at her post in engineering the entire time, monitoring every twitch and hum of the old ship's systems, half expecting disaster at any moment, relieved each time it did not come. Finally, as the ship crossed some invisible boundary deeper within the silence, the darkness outside the main viewport began, very slowly, to change. A faint light appeared far ahead, pale and blue, unlike any star the crew had seen before, its glow steady and strange, illuminating something enormous, floating in the black distance. Tomas Reyes stared at the screen, his voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, I think we found it." Ahead of the Endeavour, slowly coming into view, was the wreck of a fleet unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Dozens of enormous alien ships frozen in the dark, their hulls scarred by some terrible ancient battle, surrounding a massive structure at the center that pulsed faintly with that same pale blue light, like a heart that had never quite stopped beating, even after all these years. The crew of the Endeavour sat in stunned silence, staring at the graveyard of an entire civilization, and the strange, glowing heart at its center, understanding, in that moment, that whatever secret the Dominion had tried so hard to hide, they were about to become the first outsiders in decades to see it with their own eyes. Shaw stood slowly from his chair, walking toward the front viewport as if pulled by something he could not name. "Bring us in closer, but slow. I want full scans running the entire time." "Aye, Captain," Tomas said, his hands steady despite the wonder on his face. As the Endeavour crept closer, the wrecked ships around them became clearer, and clearer still, their true size becoming apparent. Some of them were larger than any vessel humanity had ever built, easily 10 times the length of the Endeavour, their hulls made of a strange, dark metal that seemed to drink in the light from the pale blue glow at the center of the graveyard, rather than reflect it. Long cracks ran along their sides, some large enough that the Endeavour itself could have flown straight through them. "These wounds," Grigor said quietly, studying the readings at his station. "Look at the pattern. This wasn't one battle. This was many, over a long time. Something kept coming back to finish the job." Dr. Nwosu leaned over his shoulder to look, or something kept trying to survive, and kept failing. Mira's voice came through the comm, tight with tension. "Captain, I'm picking up faint power signatures from 3 of the wrecks. Not much, barely a whisper, but they're not fully dead." Shaw turned to Tomas. "Ask the Hollow what those ships were." The response came slower this time, as if the Hollow itself found the memory difficult to share. Piece by piece, Tomas translated the strange concepts into something the crew could understand. The wrecked fleet before them had belonged to the Threll, the empire that once called this region home. These ships were the last of their military, gathered here in one final stand against the Dominion, decades ago, in a battle that had lasted, according to the Hollow's fractured translation, nearly 11 days without pause. 11 days, Grigor repeated, disbelief clear in his voice. No fleet fights for 11 days straight. "They did," Tomas said quietly, still reading the incoming translation, "because they were fighting for something more than a battle. The Hollow says they were protecting something, guarding it with everything they had left. The light," Dr. Nwosu said, staring at the pale blue glow, pulsing steadily at the heart of the wreckage. "They were guarding that thing." Shaw nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the strange structure ahead of them, larger now that they had drawn closer. easily the size of a small moon, its surface smooth and dark, except for veins of that pale blue light running across it like glowing rivers beneath ice. "Ask them what it is," Shaw said. The answer came, and this time, it left even the most steady members of the crew unsettled. The structure was not a weapon, not a ship, and not a simple relic. According to the Hollow, it was something the Threll called a cradle, a vast archive built to hold the memory, the knowledge, and in some strange way the Hollow struggled to explain clearly, the very consciousness of their entire species, gathered together in one place, as their homeworld and colonies fell one by one to the Dominion's advance. "They uploaded themselves," Dr. Nwosu said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. "When they knew they were going to lose, they tried to save what they could, not their bodies, but everything else, their memories, their history, their minds." "And it worked?" Grigor asked, skepticism heavy in his tone. Tomas kept reading the translation, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Hollow says it worked, partly. Enough of the Threll survived inside that cradle that they are, in some fashion, still present, still aware. But trapped, unable to leave, unable to rebuild, unable to do anything, except exist inside their own memory, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Shaw asked. The response came clear and immediate this time, and Tomas's voice shook slightly as he read it aloud to the bridge. "Waiting for someone willing to listen to the truth, and brave enough to carry it beyond this silence." The bridge fell quiet again, each crew member processing the weight of what they had just learned. An entire civilization, reduced to ghosts trapped inside a machine, guarded by the same strange force that had swallowed the Endeavor's sensors the moment they crossed into this region, waiting, perhaps for decades, for someone from outside to finally arrive. Shaw turned to look at his crew, one by one. He saw fear in some faces, wonder in others, and in Grigor Petrov's weathered eyes, something that looked almost like grief. "The Dominion knew about this," Shaw said slowly. "They knew this place still existed, that something of the Threll survived. That's why they warned us away, not because it's dangerous to us, because they don't want anyone to know what they really did here." "Genocide," Dr. Nwosu said quietly, the word heavy in the recycled air of the bridge. "They committed genocide and buried the truth of it out here in the dark, hoping no one would ever come looking. And we did," Tomas said, almost in disbelief at his own words. "We came looking, and now they're talking to us." Mira's voice crackled over the comm once more, quieter now, almost hesitant. "Captain, for what it's worth, if this cradle really holds what's left of an entire species, I don't think we should just fly away and forget what we saw here. I don't think we can." Shaw looked back at the pale blue light pulsing steadily ahead of them, at the broken fleet frozen forever in its silent vigil, at the vast, patient darkness that had let them come this far. He thought about Renata's words again, about carrying the truth home, whatever it turned out to be. "Reyes," he said finally, "tell them we hear them. Tell them we're willing to listen to whatever they want to tell us, and that we'll do everything in our power to carry the truth back to Earth." Tomas nodded, already working at his console, translating the words as carefully as he could into the strange shared language they had built together over the past few hours. The response, when it finally came, was longer than anything the Hollow had shared before, a vast, complicated stream of memory and feeling that took nearly 20 minutes to fully translate, and left every member of the crew changed in some quiet way by the time it finished. It was the story of the Threll, told in fragments and feelings rather than simple words, a peaceful species who had built beautiful cities long before the Dominion ever noticed their small corner of the galaxy, who had tried, again and again, to negotiate peace as the Dominion's fleets advanced, and who had been answered each time with fire and silence, until nothing remained of their worlds except this single, hidden cradle, guarded now by whatever strange presence the survivors called the Hollow, born somehow from the sheer weight of grief and memory left behind. By the time the translation finished, the bridge was utterly silent, 12 people staring at the pale blue glow ahead of them, understanding that they had stumbled into something far larger, and far more important, than any simple border dispute or trade warning. They had found a truth that an entire empire had tried to erase, and now, whether they wanted the burden or not, it was theirs to carry home. Shaw straightened slowly in his chair, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts behind his eyes. "Mira, How much longer can the engines hold before we need to think about heading back? A few more hours, safely, Mira answered. Longer if we're careful. Shaw nodded, turning back to the viewport, to the ancient wreckage, and the strange, patient light at its heart. Then let's use every minute we have left. We came here to find the truth. Let's make sure we understand enough of it to bring it home properly. Outside the ship, in the vast and silent dark, the Hollow watched the small human vessel drift closer to the cradle, and for the first time in decades, felt something that, in any language, might have been called hope. The Endeavour drifted closer to the cradle, its old hull creaking softly under the strange pressure of the region, while the crew worked to learn everything they could before time ran out. Dr. Amara Nwosu had moved to a secondary science station, running deep scans of the massive structure, trying to understand its size and shape in ways numbers could describe, even if the true meaning of it defied simple measurement. It's roughly the size of a small moon, she reported, reading the numbers off her screen. But the mass doesn't match. It's far lighter than it should be for something that size. Whatever it's made of, it's not like anything in our records. Maybe it's not fully physical, Tomas Reyes offered, still working at his own station, refining the translation link with the being that called itself the Hollow. Maybe part of it exists somewhere our instruments can't fully measure. Grigor Petrov frowned at his weapons console, watching the wrecked Threll fleet drift silently around them. I don't like operating on maybes out here. None of us do, Shaw said, but we didn't come here for easy answers. As the hours passed, the connection with the Hollow grew steadier, the translations clearer, the strange pressure behind the words easier for the crew to bear without discomfort. It became clear that the Hollow was not one single mind, but something like a shared awareness, formed from the collected memories of the Threll who had uploaded themselves into the cradle in their final days. It existed both inside the structure and, in some way none of them fully understood, spread throughout the strange field of energy that blanketed this entire region of space, the same field that swallowed light and sound and sensor readings alike. Ask them why they helped us, Shaw said at one point, as Tomas worked the console. Why show us any of this, instead of letting the Dominion's warning keep us away? The response took time to translate fully, but when it came, it carried a weight that settled heavily over the bridge. Because you came seeking truth, not conquest, the message read. Because your kind stood at the edge of our grave and chose to knock rather than walk past, or dig us up for profit as others have tried before. Others have been here? Grigor asked sharply. Tomas relayed the question, and the answer that followed sent a chill through the crew. Over the decades since the Threll's destruction, a handful of scavenger ships, mostly small pirate crews looking for ancient technology to sell, had stumbled into the edges of the silence. None of them had come seeking understanding. They had come looking for weapons, for salvage, for anything valuable they could strip from the wreckage and sell to the highest bidder. The Hollow, in its slow, patient way, had turned each of them back, sometimes gently, sometimes less so, unwilling to let its people's memory become nothing more than scrap parts sold on some distant black market. That explains the warning, Dr. Nwosu said quietly. The Dominion doesn't want anyone finding out what's really out here, whether it's the truth of what they did, or the fact that this place can defend itself against intruders. Shaw nodded slowly, processing the weight of it all. Ask them this then. If they've turned away every other ship that's come here looking for profit, why let us get this close? Why talk to us at all? The Hollow's answer, when it came, was simple, and struck deeper than any of the crew expected. Because your ship is old and worn, and was sent here by those who expected it never to return. We know what it means to be discarded, to be considered worthless by those who should have valued us. We saw ourselves in you, small light, before we ever heard a single word from your mouths. The bridge fell into a heavy silence. Mira Voss, listening in from engineering, felt her throat tighten at the words. She thought of the years she had spent alone in the docking bay, keeping the Endeavour's systems from rusting shut, while everyone else assumed the old ship was already as good as scrap. Captain, she said quietly over the comm, I think we owe them more than just listening. I think we need to figure out how to actually help them, somehow. Shaw considered her words carefully before responding. Reyes, ask them directly. What do they want from us? What would help them most? The response took longer this time, as if the Hollow itself was considering the question with great care before answering. When the translation finally resolved, it described something both simple and enormous in its implications. The Thrall who survived within the cradle did not want war, and they did not want revenge against the Dominion, though many among them still carried the grief of what had been taken from them. What they wanted, more than anything, was for their story to be known, truly known, beyond the edges of this silent grave, so that they would not simply vanish from the memory of the galaxy entirely, forgotten as if they had never existed at all. They also wanted, if it was possible, a way to finally rest. The cradle had preserved a fragment of their people, but it was not truly living, not in any way that brought them peace. It was existence without ending, memory without growth, a form of survival that had become, after so many decades, its own kind of quiet suffering. They want to die, Dr. Nwosu said softly, understanding settling over her features, or something like it, a real ending, instead of this in-between state. Can we do that? Grigor asked. Do we even have the ability to end something like this, safely, without causing more harm? Tomas shook his head slowly. I don't think that's a decision we can make on our own, not without understanding this cradle, far better than we currently do. This isn't like turning off a machine. There are, according to the Hollow, still active minds within it. Ending it wrong could be its own kind of tragedy. Shaw stood from his chair, walking closer to the viewport, staring out at the pale blue light pulsing steadily within the vast structure ahead of them. Then that's not something we decide today. That's something Earth needs to help us understand properly, with time and care, and people far smarter about this than any of us on this ship. He turned back to Tomas. Tell them this. Tell them we can't promise to solve everything today, not with the little we understand and the little time we have left before we need to start heading home. But we can promise to carry their story to Earth, exactly as they've shared it with us, and to bring back people who might actually be able to help them find whatever peace they're looking for. The response, when it came, carried something that felt, for the first time since they had entered the silence, close to genuine relief. That is enough, Small Light. That is more than we have been offered in a very long time. As the crew processed the weight of this exchange, Mira's voice broke through the quiet once more, this time with a note of urgency. Captain, I'm reading a change in the region around us. The strange field that's been blocking our sensors, it's weakening, just slightly, right around our position. Tomas checked his own readings and confirmed it. She's right. It looks like the Hollow is deliberately clearing a small window for us. Maybe to let us get better data before we leave. Shaw seized the opportunity immediately. Get everything you can. Full scans of the cradle, the wrecked fleet, anything that might help our scientists back home understand what we're dealing with. For the next hour, the crew worked without pause, gathering every scrap of data the temporary clearing allowed, recording detailed images of the Thrall fleet, careful measurements of the cradle's strange structure, and long, painstaking transcripts of everything the Hollow had shared with them so far. Dr. Nwosu cross-referenced medical and biological data where she could, trying to understand what kind of species the Thrall had been before their destruction. Grigor Petrov studied the weapon systems visible on the wrecked ships, noting technology far beyond anything Earth currently possessed, technology that, in the wrong hands, could shift the balance of power across the entire region. Captain, Grigor said eventually, some of this weaponry, if the Dominion ever got their hands on functioning versions of it, could make them even more dangerous than they already are. We need to be careful how we report this. If the wrong people back home get excited about salvage rather than truth, we could cause exactly the kind of tragedy the Hollow is afraid of. Shaw nodded gravely. Understood. We report the truth, but we make it clear that this place isn't a resource to be plundered. It's the last resting place of an entire people. We treat it that way, in every report we file. As the data collection continued, Tomas noticed something troubling in the sensor readings, just beyond the edge of the Hollow's temporary clearing. A faint but distinct energy signature, moving steadily toward their position from the direction of Dominion space. Captain, I've got movement, he said, urgency creeping into his voice. Something's coming, and it's moving fast. Shaw's attention snapped immediately to the new readings. Identify it. Tomas worked quickly, cross-referencing the energy signature against every database the Endeavor carried. After a tense minute, his face went pale. It matches the profile of a Dominion patrol cruiser. Military grade, faster than anything we have, and it's heading directly for our position. How long until it arrives? Shaw asked. At current speed, maybe 40 minutes. The bridge fell into tense silence as the weight of the situation settled over everyone. They had found the truth they came looking for, and more besides, but now, with a Dominion warship bearing down on their position, the real question became whether they would survive long enough to carry that truth home at all. Shaw turned to the comm. Mira, I need engines at full readiness. We may need to move fast. Very soon. Understood, Captain. Mira's voice came back, tight with tension. Give me 10 minutes to make sure everything's stable for a hard burn. Shaw turned back to Tomas. Tell the Hollow what's happening. Ask if there's anything they can do to help us, or if we need to start planning our own way out of here. The response came almost immediately this time, brief and urgent, in a way none of the Hollow's previous messages had been. We cannot fight your battles, small light, but we can hide you a little longer, and guide you toward a path the hunters do not expect. Trust the darkness. It remembers how to keep secrets. As the crew braced themselves for what was to come, the strange field around the Endeavor began to thicken once more, swallowing the ship back into deep shadow, even as, somewhere beyond that shadow, a Dominion warship closed in, unaware that the small, old vessel it hunted carried within it a truth powerful enough to shake an empire to its foundations. Mira Voss worked fast in engineering, running her hands over old panels and worn switches with practiced ease, coaxing the engines back to full readiness, one system at a time. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air of the engine room. She had spent 20 years learning every quirk of this ship, every place where a wire might come loose at the wrong moment, every trick needed to squeeze a little more power out of engines built decades before she was born. Now, all of that knowledge mattered more than it ever had. Come on, old girl, she whispered, patting the side of the main reactor housing. You've carried people through worse than this, just a little longer. On the bridge, Shaw studied the tactical display, as Tomas fed him updated readings on the approaching cruiser. Grigor, what are we looking at if it catches us? Grigor's face was grim as he reviewed the data. A Dominion patrol cruiser, standard configuration, carries twice our weapons output, and shields rated far beyond anything we've got. If it catches us in open space, we don't win that fight, Captain. Not even close. Then we don't let it catch us, Shaw said firmly. Reyes, what's this path the Hollow mentioned? Tomas worked at his console, translating a fresh stream of information that had begun flowing in from the Hollow the moment the danger became clear. It's giving us coordinates, Captain, but they don't make sense on our normal charts. It looks like it wants us to fly directly through the debris field of the wrecked fleet. Through the wreckage? Grigor said, alarmed. That's suicide. One wrong move and we tear the hull open on broken metal. The Hollow says the field's disruption is strongest around the wreckage, Tomas continued, still reading. It thinks the cruiser's sensors will have trouble tracking us if we hide among the debris. It's offering to guide our path directly, step by step, if we trust it. Shaw weighed the risk for only a moment before deciding. Trusting an alien intelligence they had known for mere hours to guide them through a field of wrecked warships was a terrifying gamble. But the alternative, waiting in open space for a Dominion cruiser with superior weapons and shields, offered no real chance at all. Do it, Shaw said. Reyes, open a direct channel and let the Hollow guide our navigation. Mira, I need those engines ready the second we start moving. Almost there, Captain. Mira's voice came back, strained. Give me 2 more minutes. The 2 minutes stretched on with agonizing slowness, every member of the bridge crew watching the approaching cruiser's signature grow steadily closer on their screens. Dr. Nwosu quietly moved between crew stations, checking on people even as she monitored her own console, offering a steady hand on a shoulder here, a calm word there, doing what she could to keep panic from taking hold. Finally, Mira's voice rang out. Engines ready, Captain. Full power on your mark. Reyes, patch the Hollow's guidance directly into helm control, Shaw ordered. Let's move. The Endeavor's old engines roared to life, with a surge of power that shook the entire ship. And under the strange, steady guidance, flowing from the Hollow through Tomas's console, the ship banked hard and dove directly into the heart of the wrecked Threll fleet. Massive broken hulls loomed on every side, some close enough that the crew could see individual scorch marks and battle scars etched into their surfaces, but somehow, guided by an intelligence that seemed to know every gap and passage through the field like the back of its own hand, the Endeavour threaded through the wreckage without a single collision. "I don't believe it," Grigor muttered, watching the narrow gaps flash past on the viewport. Gaps that should have been impossible to navigate at their current speed. It's like the ship knows exactly where to go before we even ask. "It's not the ship," Tomas said, sweat on his brow, as he continued relaying the flow of guidance data. "It's the Hollow, watching every inch of this space, guiding us through in real time." Behind them, the Dominion cruiser slowed as it entered the edge of the debris field, its own sensors clearly struggling against the same disruption that had blinded the Endeavour's instruments earlier. Tomas watched its signature hesitate, search, and finally begin moving more cautiously, no longer closing the distance nearly as fast. "It's slowing down," Tomas reported, relief clear in his voice. "I think it's having the same trouble we did when we first got here." Shaw allowed himself a small breath of relief, though he did not let his guard down. "Keep us moving. We're not out of this yet." For the next 20 minutes, the Endeavour wove carefully through the maze of wrecked ships, guided every step of the way by the patient, steady presence of the Hollow, while the Dominion cruiser searched behind them, unable to close the gap through the same disrupted field that had protected this graveyard for decades. Slowly, the readings of the pursuing cruiser began to fade, until finally, Tomas let out a long breath and looked up from his console. "Captain, I've lost their signature completely. I think we did it. I think we actually lost them." A quiet cheer rippled through the bridge, tired and relieved. 12 people who had just stared down a superior enemy warship and come out the other side intact, thanks to the guidance of a being none of them had known existed a mere day before. Shaw allowed himself a small, tired smile before turning serious again. "Reyes, thank the Hollow. Tell them we owe them a debt we're not sure we can ever fully repay." The response came through, warm despite its strange, fragmented translation. "You owe us nothing, small light. You listened when others chose not to. That alone is worth more than you know. But heed this warning before you go. The one who hunted you will not simply give up. Word will reach others. Your path home may not be as quiet as your path here." Shaw nodded slowly, processing the weight of that warning even as relief at their narrow escape still hummed through his body. "Understood. We'll be ready." As the Endeavour cleared the last edge of the debris field and began preparing for the long journey back toward the border of known space, Shaw took a moment to gather his senior officers briefly on the bridge, Grigor, Tomas, and Dr. Nwosu, with Mira joining by comm from engineering. "We have what we came for," Shaw said quietly. "More than we came for, honestly. But the Hollow's warning is clear. Getting home safely isn't guaranteed. I want every system checked, every weapon ready, and every one of us prepared for a fight if it comes to that." "It'll come to that," Grigor said grimly. "A Dominion patrol cruiser doesn't lose its target and just walk away quietly. Not when there's a chance we're carrying proof of what they did here. Then we make sure that proof gets home," Dr. Nwosu said firmly, "no matter what it costs us." Shaw looked around at his small, tired crew, each of them carrying, in one way or another, the weight of everything they had witnessed over the past several hours. Agreed. Let's bring the Endeavour home, one final time. As the old ship turned its nose back toward the distant, unseen light of human space, the crew settled once more into their long watch, knowing now that the journey ahead would be far more dangerous than the journey that had brought them here, carrying with them, not just data and recordings, but the last living memory of an entire people, waiting, after decades of silence, for the galaxy to finally hear their story. 3 days into the return journey, the Endeavour's sensors picked up the first sign that the Hollow's warning had been correct. Tomas Reyes noticed it during a routine sweep. A faint energy trail crossing their projected course, still cooling, evidence that at least one ship had passed through recently, searching. "Captain, I think they've widened the search," Tomas said, studying the readings carefully. "This isn't the same cruiser that chased us into the debris field. Different engine signature. I think the Dominion sent more than one ship looking for us." Shaw felt the weight of that news settle heavily in his chest. How many, do you think? Impossible to say for certain, but based on the pattern of these trails, at least 2, maybe 3 separate patrols, spread out along likely paths back toward Earth space. Grigor Petrov leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. They know we found something. They're not just chasing a lost scout ship anymore. They're hunting witnesses. The bridge fell into a heavy silence at those words. Dr. Nuosu spoke up quietly from her station. Then we need to assume every remaining day of this journey could bring us into contact with a hunting patrol. We should prepare accordingly. Shaw nodded slowly, turning to the comm. Mira, status on the engines after the debris field maneuver. Holding steady, Captain. Mira's voice came back, though tired. That run took more out of the old girl than I'd like, but she's still solid. I can squeeze a bit more speed if we truly need it, but I wouldn't want to push much harder than that without real risk of damage. Understood, Shaw said. Keep everything ready. We may need every bit of speed you can give us. Over the following 2 days, the crew fell into a state of careful, watchful tension, running silent where they could, avoiding any unnecessary broadcasts, keeping their course as unpredictable as possible, without wasting too much precious time. Tomas spent nearly every waking hour monitoring the sensors, cross-referencing every faint signal against known Dominion patrol patterns, trying to map a safe path through what had become, in effect, a hunting ground. On the 5th day since leaving the silence, disaster arrived without warning. Captain, contact! Tomas called out suddenly, his voice sharp with alarm. Close range, moving fast, directly ahead of our current heading. Shaw's eyes snapped to the main screen as a new signature bloomed into view. Far too close for comfort. A Dominion warship larger than the one that had chased them near the debris field, clearly built for serious combat, rather than simple patrol duty. Identify, Shaw ordered. Grigor's hands moved fast over his console, cross-referencing the readings. Dominion heavy cruiser, Captain. Full weapons array. Shields well beyond anything we're carrying. This isn't a patrol ship. This is a warship built to fight. They found us, Dr. Nuosu said quietly, gripping the edge of her station. Options, Shaw said, forcing his voice to remain steady, despite the fear rising in his chest. Talk to me. Fast. We can't outrun something that size in open space, Grigor said. Not with our engines, and we definitely can't outfight it. Our weapons upgrade helped, but not nearly enough to stand against a heavy cruiser. There's a small asteroid field 2 hours off our current course, Tomas offered quickly, already pulling up the star charts. Not ideal cover, but better than open space. If we can reach it before they close the distance, we might be able to break line of sight long enough to change course unseen. 2 hours is a long time to survive against something that size closing in, Grigor said grimly. Shaw made his decision fast. Reyes, plot a course for the asteroid field. Mira, I need everything the engines have got, right now. Understood, Captain. Mira's voice came back immediately, already working. Pushing to maximum safe output. The Endeavor's old engines surged with power, the entire ship groaning under the strain, as it accelerated hard, banking sharply to put as much distance as possible between itself and the approaching Dominion cruiser. On the main screen, the enemy ship's signature adjusted course to match, beginning a slow, steady pursuit. They're matching our vector, Tomas reported, tension thick in his voice. Closing speed is slower than I feared, but they're definitely still gaining. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, as the chase continued, the crew watching in tense silence, as the gap between the two ships slowly, steadily closed. Dr. Nuosu moved quietly between stations, checking on the crew. Her calm presence a small anchor amid the mounting fear. Captain, Grigor said suddenly, studying his console, they're powering weapons. I think they're going to try a shot at extreme range, hoping to slow us down before we reach the asteroid field. Evasive maneuvers, Shaw ordered immediately. Reyes, keep us as unpredictable as possible. The ship banked and weaved as best its old frame allowed, and a moment later, a brilliant flash of light streaked past, just off their starboard side, close enough that the entire crew felt the ship shudder from the sheer force of the near miss. That was too close, Dr. Nuosu said, gripping her station tightly. They're adjusting, Grigor warned. Next shot will be better aimed. Mira, anything more you can give me? Shaw called into the comm, urgency clear in his voice. There was a pause. Then Mira's voice came back, strained but determined. I can push another 10%, Captain, but it's going to put real stress on the old systems. might cause damage we can't easily fix. Do it, Shaw said without hesitation. We need every second we can buy. The engines roared louder, the entire ship vibrating from the strain, and slowly, painfully, the Endeavour pulled slightly further ahead, buying precious extra distance, even as the enemy cruiser fired another volley, this one closer still, close enough that alarms blared across the bridge as the ship's outer shields absorbed a glancing hit. Shields at 70%, Grigor reported. We can't take many more hits like that. Almost there, Tomas called out, watching the star chart. Asteroid field in 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes felt like the longest of Shaw's entire career, every second stretched taut with tension, as the enemy cruiser closed the gap, firing intermittent shots that forced constant evasive maneuvers, each one shaving away a little more of the Endeavour's remaining shields. Finally, just as the situation seemed most desperate, the ship crossed into the outer edge of the asteroid field, and immediately, the enemy's sensor lock began to waver. They're losing tracking, Tomas called out, relief flooding his voice. The asteroid field is interfering with their targeting systems. Keep us moving, Shaw ordered. Deep into the field, at speed you can manage without hitting anything. The Endeavour wove carefully between tumbling rocks of all sizes, some small enough to bounce harmlessly off the shields, others large enough that a direct collision would spell disaster. Grigor called out warnings as new obstacles appeared on sensors, while Tomas adjusted their course second by second, guiding the old ship through the maze of stone with a skill born of pure necessity. Behind them, the Dominion cruiser slowed its pursuit, clearly unwilling to risk its own hull navigating too aggressively through the dense field, giving the Endeavour precious room to maneuver and, eventually, to slip away entirely from direct pursuit. After nearly 40 minutes of careful navigation, Tomas finally reported clear skies ahead, no trace of the enemy cruiser's signature anywhere on their sensors. A wave of exhausted relief swept through the bridge, the crew allowing themselves a brief moment to breathe after the terror of the chase. Status report, Shaw said, forcing himself to stay focused, despite his own racing heart. Shields at 55%, slowly recovering, Grigor reported. We took some damage to the outer hull from that last close hit, but nothing critical. Engines held together, Mira's voice came through the comm, tired but steady. Though I won't lie, Captain, that push took a real toll. I'd recommend against any more full burns unless we absolutely have no other choice. Shaw nodded slowly, processing the situation. Understood. Everyone, good work. That could have gone a lot worse. Dr. Nwosu moved through the bridge, quickly checking each crew member for injury or serious stress, relieved to find nothing more severe than frayed nerves and exhaustion. As the immediate danger passed, the reality of their situation settled in more heavily than before. They know exactly where we are, roughly, Grigor said grimly, once the initial relief had faded. That cruiser will report our position and heading. More ships will be coming. Then we need to change our approach, Shaw said, thinking quickly. Reyes, is there a way to alter our course significantly? Something unpredictable enough that any ships responding to that report won't be able to easily guess our path. Tomas worked at his console for several minutes, running calculations. There's a longer route, Captain. One that swings wide through a region with heavier natural interference, similar to what we found near the Silence, though nowhere near as extreme. It would add almost 2 days to our journey, but it might make us much harder to track. Do it, Shaw said. Better a longer, safer path than a shorter one that gets us caught. As the Endeavour adjusted course, beginning the long, careful journey along the safer but longer route home, Shaw found himself standing quietly near the main viewport, staring out at the distant stars, thinking about everything the crew had witnessed and survived over the past several days. The truth about the Threll, the warning from the Hollow, and now this desperate chase through hostile space, all of it weighed heavily on his mind. Mira found him there a while later, having left engineering briefly to check on the crew in person. She looked as tired as everyone else, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before they entered the Silence. We're going to make it home, Captain, she said quietly, more statement than question. Shaw turned to look at her. I hope you're right. I know this old ship, Mira said, a small, tired smile crossing her face. She's been counted out before, more times than I can remember. People always assumed she was finished, that she had nothing left to give. but she keeps proving them wrong. Shaw allowed himself a small smile in return. Let's hope she's got one more surprise left in her then, because something tells me the hardest part of this journey still lies ahead. As the Endeavour continued its careful path homeward, carrying its precious cargo of truth and memory, neither Shaw nor any member of his crew yet knew that the greatest challenge awaiting them would not come from Dominion warships at all, but from something far more difficult to fight, the disbelief of their own people, when they finally arrived home carrying a secret that would sound, to anyone who had not lived through it, like nothing more than an impossible story. The following 2 days passed with a strange mixture of quiet routine and constant tension. The crew took turns resting in short shifts, no one quite able to fully relax, knowing that at any moment another Dominion ship might appear on their sensors. Tomas Reyes barely left his station, cycling through every frequency he could monitor, listening for any sign that word of their location had spread further than the 2 ships they had already encountered. On the 6th day since leaving the silence, he found something that made his blood run cold. "Captain, I'm picking up a general broadcast," he said, adjusting his headset carefully. "Dominion military channel. Wide distribution. I think this is about us." Shaw moved quickly to stand behind him. "Translate it." It took Tomas several minutes, working with the ship's translation systems alongside his own growing understanding of Dominion language patterns built up over years of study before the mission. When he finally had a clear version, he read it aloud, his voice tight. "It's an alert to all Dominion patrol and military vessels within 3 sectors. Description matches our ship exactly. It says we are wanted for, quote, unauthorized entry into a restricted zone and theft of sensitive historical data. It authorizes any vessel encountering us to use, quote, whatever force necessary to prevent our escape." The bridge went quiet. Grigor let out a slow breath. So now it's not just a couple of patrol ships. It's an open order across half their border fleet. "They're scared," Dr. Nwosu said quietly. "An empire that powerful doesn't put out an order like that over nothing. Whatever we're carrying, they're terrified of what happens if it gets out." Shaw straightened, forcing calm into his voice despite the fear tightening his chest. "Then we make sure it does get out. Reyes, keep monitoring that channel. I want to know the moment new orders come through, or if they narrow down our likely position." For the next several hours, the crew worked in tense silence, adjusting their course repeatedly, based on fragments of information Tomas managed to piece together from intercepted Dominion communications. Twice more, distant contacts appeared on their sensors, forcing brief, heart-pounding course changes, though neither came close enough to force a direct confrontation. During a rare quiet moment, Dr. Nwosu found Grigor sitting alone in the small mess hall, staring down at a cup of cooling coffee he had not touched. "You've gone quiet," she said, sitting across from him. "That's not like you." Grigor looked up, a tired, troubled expression on his weathered face. "I fought pirates once, back before the aliens showed up. Small skirmishes, nothing like this. I always told myself the universe was probably full of other people out there, and that maybe, someday, we'd find them, and things would finally make more sense. Some bigger picture we were missing. And now? Now I've seen what an empire far older and more advanced than us is capable of," Grigor said quietly. "Wiping out an entire people, and then spending decades making sure nobody ever finds out. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like we just found bigger, older versions of the same ugly things we already knew about ourselves." Dr. Nwosu considered his words carefully. "Maybe. Or maybe it means the choice we make now matters even more. The Threll tried to fight, and lost everything. The Hollow didn't ask us for revenge. It asked us to remember, and to tell the truth. Maybe that's the difference we can actually make, even against something as powerful as the Dominion." Grigor managed a small, tired smile. "You always did have a way of finding the bright side, Doctor." "Somebody has to," she said, standing and patting his shoulder gently, before returning to her station. On the 8th day, disaster nearly struck again. A Dominion scout ship, smaller and faster than the heavy cruiser they had escaped earlier, appeared suddenly at close range, having apparently been lying in wait along one of the more likely paths back toward Earth space. "Contact, close range," Tomas called out urgently. "It's already locked onto us, Captain." "Evasive now," Shaw ordered, gripping the arms of his chair as the ship banked hard. The scout ship, though smaller than the cruiser, was faster and more maneuverable, matching the Endeavor's evasive movements with unsettling precision. Grigor's hands flew across his weapons console. "Captain, if it gets a clean shot at our engines, we're finished out here," he warned. "Can we outmaneuver it?" Shaw asked. "Not for long," Grigor admitted. "It's built for exactly this kind of close pursuit." Shaw made a fast decision. "Grigor, target its engines. If we can slow it down even briefly, we might buy enough time to break away." Grigor's weapons systems, upgraded before the mission began, fired a precise burst that struck the scout ship's rear engine section, causing it to stagger briefly off course. It wasn't enough to disable the ship entirely, but it bought the Endeavor several crucial seconds. "Now, Reyes, hard burn. Best heading you've got," Shaw called out. The old engines roared once more, pushing the ship to speeds that made every joint and panel groan in protest, and slowly, painfully, the Endeavor pulled away from the damaged scout ship, which struggled to regain full power in time to continue effective pursuit. Several tense minutes later, Tomas finally confirmed they had broken free of the scout's sensor range. The bridge crew allowed themselves another brief, exhausted moment of relief, though the mood remained far more subdued than after their earlier escape. "That's twice now," Dr. Nwosu said quietly, checking on the crew for any injuries. "We're running out of luck." "We're not running on luck," Shaw said firmly, though he understood the fear behind her words. "We're running on skill, and on a ship that refuses to quit, even after 60 years of everyone assuming she would. We'll make it home. We have to." Mira's voice came through the comm, sounding more strained than before. "Captain, I need to report some damage from that last burn. Nothing critical, but the secondary power coupling is showing serious wear. If we push this hard again, we risk losing power to non-essential systems, maybe even some of our navigation backups." Shaw absorbed this news grimly. "Understood. We'll try to avoid another full burn unless it's truly our last option." As the ship continued its slow, careful journey homeward, the crew grew increasingly aware that each new day brought them closer not only to Earth, but to the growing possibility of a final, decisive confrontation with Dominion forces, determined to prevent them from ever delivering their message. Yet despite the exhaustion and fear that had settled over the crew, something else had grown steadily alongside it. A quiet, stubborn resolve, born from having witnessed firsthand the tragedy of a people erased and forgotten, and having been trusted, however briefly, to carry their memory forward. Late that night, as most of the crew rested in short shifts, Shaw found himself once again standing near the bridge viewport, staring out at the passing stars, thinking about Renata's words before their departure, and about the Hollow's final message before they left the silence behind. He did not know, in that quiet moment, whether they would truly make it home safely. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever happened next, the truth they carried was worth every risk they had taken to find it. On the 11th day since leaving the silence, the Endeavor finally crossed back into the outer edge of known space, the familiar patterns of charted stars appearing on their screens for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. The crew, exhausted from constant tension and repeated close calls, allowed themselves a moment of quiet relief, though none of them fully relaxed. They knew Dominion patrols could still be lurking anywhere along the border, and the threat of pursuit was not something that simply vanished the moment they crossed an invisible line on a star chart. "Captain, I'm picking up Earth Fleet signal beacons," Tomas Reyes reported, a note of genuine hope creeping into his tired voice. "We're close. Maybe 2 more days at current speed." Shaw allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Then let's not slow down now." But the danger was not yet finished. Late on the 12th day, as the Endeavor pushed steadily toward Earth's defense perimeter, Grigor Petrov's console suddenly flared with an urgent warning. "Captain, multiple contacts, closing fast from behind." He called out, 3 ships, Dominion configuration, and they're moving faster than anything we've faced so far." Shaw's heart sank as he studied the readings. "Identify them." "Dominion interceptors," Grigor said grimly. "Smaller than the cruisers we faced before, but built for pure speed. They must have anticipated our route and set an ambush near the border." "Time to intercept?" Shaw asked. "At current speed, less than 20 minutes, Grigor answered. The bridge fell into tense silence, Mira's voice crackled over the comm. She had clearly been listening in. "Captain, the engines can't outrun interceptors built for speed. Not even close. And definitely not after everything we've already put them through." Shaw's mind raced, searching for any option that might save them now. So close to home after everything the crew had survived. "Reyes, can you reach Earth Fleet Command? Any signal at all?" Tomas worked quickly at his console. "We're still too far for a clean signal, Captain, but I might be able to send a compressed burst, something that could reach a relay station if we're lucky." "Do it," Shaw ordered. "Send everything. Our position, the Dominion pursuit, and every piece of data we gathered in the silence. If we don't make it the rest of the way, at least the truth gets home." As Tomas worked frantically to compile and transmit the burst of data, the 3 Dominion interceptors closed steadily on the Endeavor's position, weapons already powering for an attack. Grigor prepared the ship's own defenses as best he could, knowing full well they stood little chance against 3 faster, better-armed vessels working together. "Message sent," Tomas confirmed after several tense minutes, sweat visible on his brow. "No confirmation of receipt yet, but it's out there." "Good work," Shaw said. "Now everyone, brace for whatever comes next." The first interceptor opened fire at extreme range, a warning shot, meant to demonstrate their willingness to use force. Shaw ordered immediate evasive maneuvers, the old ship weaving as best it could, its worn systems straining under the effort. "Shields holding, but barely," Grigor reported after the first exchange. "They're not trying to destroy us outright, Captain. I think they want to disable us and take the ship intact, along with whatever data we're carrying." "Then we make that as difficult as possible," Shaw said firmly. For several harrowing minutes, the Endeavor twisted and turned under Shaw's careful direction, absorbing glancing blows from the pursuing interceptors, while Grigor returned fire whenever an opening presented itself, managing to strike glancing hits against 2 of the 3 pursuing ships without fully disabling either. Then, just as the situation seemed truly desperate, Tomas's console lit up with an incoming transmission. "Captain, it's Earth Fleet Command. They received our burst transmission, and..." His voice caught with sudden, overwhelming relief. "Captain, they're already moving." A response fleet was dispatched the moment Admiral Cole received word we might be in danger near the border. "They're less than 10 minutes out." A ragged cheer went up across the bridge, quickly tempered by the ongoing battle still raging around them. 10 minutes is still 10 minutes, Shaw reminded everyone. "Stay sharp. We're not safe yet." The next 10 minutes felt like the longest of the entire mission, the Endeavor continuing its desperate evasive dance while sustaining increasingly serious damage, shields dropping steadily under repeated fire, until finally, just as one interceptor lined up what might have been a final, disabling shot, 3 sleek Earth Fleet cruisers dropped out of warp directly into the middle of the engagement. The Dominion interceptors, clearly unprepared for a full Earth Fleet response arriving so quickly, broke off their attack almost immediately, retreating back toward Dominion space, rather than risk a larger confrontation they had not anticipated. On the bridge of the Endeavor, the crew watched in stunned, exhausted relief as the threat finally, truly passed. "We made it," Dr. Nwosu said softly, disbelief evident in her voice. "We actually made it." Shaw allowed himself, for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, to fully relax in his chair, closing his eyes briefly, as the weight of the entire mission finally began to lift from his shoulders. "Good work, everyone," he said quietly. "All of you, we did it." Before the Endeavor could make its final approach to Earth, one more quiet moment passed between the crew that none of them would ever forget. As the ship crossed the last stretch of open space toward the defense dock, Tomas Reyes picked up one final, faint transmission, so weak it barely registered on the sensors, a last echo of the strange, fragmented language the Hollow had used to speak with them across the silence of the void. "Captain," he said softly, "I think this is from them, from the Hollow. It must have found some way to reach this far, or maybe it simply left something behind in our own systems that only activated now." Shaw walked over, listening as Tomas carefully translated the brief message, a few words really compared to the hours of exchanges before, but each one heavy with meaning. "Carry us well, small light. Do not let the silence win again." The bridge remained quiet for a long moment after that message finished, each member of the crew reflecting privately on everything they had witnessed, everything they now carried with them. not just as data in a ship's memory banks, but as a responsibility they had chosen, and would continue to choose, to honor. 3 days later, the Endeavour limped into Earth's main defense dock, its hull scarred and battered, its engines finally allowed to power down after the longest, most dangerous journey any of its crew had ever undertaken. Admiral Renata Cole herself stood waiting at the dock as the crew disembarked, relief evident on her normally composed features as she watched Shaw lead his exhausted crew down the ramp. "You're alive," she said simply, gripping Shaw's shoulder firmly. "All of you. I wasn't sure we'd see this day." "Neither were we, Admiral," Shaw admitted. "But we brought back more than we ever expected to find." What followed, over the next several weeks, was perhaps the most difficult part of the entire mission. Shaw, along with Tomas, Dr. Nwosu, and Grigor, sat through exhausting rounds of debriefing, presenting the full data they had gathered to Earth's highest scientific and military leadership. The story they told, of an entire civilization destroyed by the Dominion, of a strange surviving intelligence called the Hollow, of memories preserved within a massive structure called the Cradle, sounded, even to sympathetic ears, almost too strange and too vast to fully accept. Several senior officials expressed open skepticism during the first formal hearing. General Okafor, though supportive of the crew personally, voiced the concerns many others privately shared. "You're asking us to believe an entire empire's darkest secret, gathered from translating with an alien intelligence none of us have ever verified independently, based on a handful of readings and recordings from a single mission." "With respect, General," Dr. Nwosu replied firmly, "we didn't imagine the wrecked fleet of hundreds of ships we personally scanned. We didn't imagine the pursuit by multiple Dominion warships willing to use lethal force to stop us from bringing this information home. The data speaks for itself, if people are willing to actually examine it carefully." Dr. Lena Park, who had studied every scrap of data the Endeavour brought back with meticulous care over the following weeks, eventually became one of the crew's strongest advocates. During a critical follow-up hearing, she presented her own detailed analysis to the assembled leadership. "The technological signatures alone are unlike anything in our existing records of Dominion, or any other known alien technology," she explained, standing before a room full of skeptical faces. "The biological traces recovered from the wreckage, while limited, match no known species in our current database, human or alien. And most tellingly, the pattern of communication logged by Officer Reyes shows a level of linguistic complexity that would be extraordinarily difficult, arguably impossible, for our own systems to simply fabricate on their own." Slowly, methodically, piece by piece, the weight of careful evidence began to shift opinion, even among the most skeptical voices in Earth's leadership. It helped, too, that within days of the Endeavour's return, the Dominion itself issued a strange, uncharacteristically defensive statement through the same neutral trade channels they had used to send their original warning, denying any wrongdoing regarding a region they described only as, quote, "an old and closed matter of internal Dominion history," unquote. A statement that, to many observers, only strengthened suspicion that the crew's account held real truth. During one particularly difficult session, a younger council member, skeptical and sharp-tongued, pressed Grigor Petrov directly. "You expect us to risk open conflict with the most powerful empire in this region of space, over the word of a being none of us has ever met, relayed through a translation system built in a matter of hours?" Grigor met the man's gaze evenly, his voice calm despite the challenge. "I don't expect you to risk conflict over anyone's word alone. I expect you to look at the wreckage of hundreds of warships we personally recorded. I expect you to examine the technological signatures that match nothing in any known database. And I expect you to ask yourselves honestly why a supposedly harmless, empty region of space required 3 separate armed warships to chase down one old scout vessel that got too curious. The Dominion didn't send warriors after us because we found nothing. They sent warriors because we found everything." The room fell silent at that, and slowly, over the following days, even the most stubborn holdouts began to reconsider their position. Dr. Nwosu, for her part, spent considerable time working alongside Earth's medical and psychological teams, helping design careful protocols for any future contact with the Hollow, mindful always of the strange, delicate nature of a consciousness that existed somewhere between memory and true awareness. She often spoke, in later years, of how the experience had changed her understanding of what it truly meant to care for a patient, even one unlike anything medicine had ever encountered before. Tomas Reyes, meanwhile, became something of a quiet celebrity among Earth's growing community of linguists and communication specialists. His careful, patient work, translating the Hollow's fragmented language, held up as a model for how future contact with unknown intelligences might be approached, with humility, patience, and a willingness to listen fully before assuming understanding. Admiral Renata Cole, standing before the full assembled council during the final major hearing on the matter, made the closing argument that ultimately shifted the tide of formal opinion. "We sent an old, discarded warship into hostile space, expecting, honestly, that it might never return at all," she said, her voice steady and clear. "We sent it not because we believed in some grand mission, but because we refused to risk something we valued more, and because we refused to simply bow to an unexplained threat without at least understanding what lay behind it. That ship, and the 12 people aboard it, found something far larger than any of us anticipated, proof of an entire civilization erased from history, and a surviving remnant of that civilization who trusted us, above all others who had come before, to finally carry the truth forward. I believe them. Not simply because I want to believe a compelling story, but because every scrap of evidence we've gathered since their return supports exactly what they witnessed. The question before this council now is not whether we believe the crew of the Endeavor. The question is, what kind of people we choose to be, now that we know the truth they risked everything to bring us." In the weeks and months that followed, formal contact channels were carefully, cautiously reopened between Earth and the being known as the Hollow, guided by careful diplomatic teams working alongside Dr. Park's growing science division, determined to understand fully, and eventually help address, the quiet, patient suffering of a people trapped between memory and true rest. It would take years of careful, respectful work before any lasting resolution could be found for the survivors of the Threll, but the process, however slow, finally began. The Dominion, faced with growing awareness among neighboring species of what had happened within the silence, found itself forced into a far more cautious and careful diplomatic posture toward Earth than anyone had expected mere months before. Whatever plans they might once have held regarding humanity's small, seemingly insignificant colony of worlds, the revelation of their darkest secret, carried home against overwhelming odds by an old ship no one had expected to survive, had shifted the balance of power and reputation in ways that would echo for years to come. As for the Endeavor itself, rather than being finally scrapped as originally planned, the old warship was instead fully restored and preserved, not as a combat vessel, but as a permanent monument, docked prominently within Earth's main defense station, a quiet reminder to every new generation of officers and engineers of what could be accomplished by those who refused to accept that something old, worn, and seemingly worthless could not still carry an enormous weight of purpose, if given one final chance to prove it. Mira Voss continued to visit the ship every week, just as she always had, though now she was joined regularly by curious young cadets, eager to hear the full story firsthand, from the woman who had kept the old engines running, through humanity's most dangerous, most important mission yet. Captain Idris Shaw, along with the rest of his crew, received Earth's highest honors for their courage and service, though each of them, in their own quiet way, remained more focused on the ongoing work of honoring the trust placed in them by the Hollow, and by the memory of the Threll people, than on any medal or ceremony. Late one evening, months after their return, Shaw found himself once again standing before the Endeavor, now gleaming under careful restoration, docked permanently as a monument rather than a warship. Mira joined him there, as she often did, both of them quietly remembering everything the old ship had carried them through. "She did good, didn't she?" Mira said softly, resting a hand against the cool metal of the outer hull. "She did more than good," Shaw replied. "She proved that sometimes, the things people are quickest to throw away turn out to matter more than anyone ever expected." Somewhere far beyond Earth's borders, deep within the silent, patient dark of a region, still called the Silence by those who feared its secrets, the being known as the Hollow continued its long, careful vigil, no longer entirely alone in its grief, having finally, after decades of waiting, found someone willing to listen and to carry the truth of a forgotten people forward into a wider galaxy that would, at long last, begin to remember them. And on Earth, in classrooms and academies across the world, Children began learning a new lesson, alongside their history of first contact and early alien encounters. That courage was not always found in the newest, strongest, or most powerful things available, but sometimes, in the oldest, most overlooked ones, given one final chance to prove exactly what they were truly capable of. A year after the Endeavour's return, Admiral Renata Cole stood once more before her senior staff, though the mood in the room was very different from the tense meeting that had first set the mission in motion. A small ceremony had been arranged to mark the anniversary, and Shaw, Mira, Tomas, Grigor, and Dr. Nwosu had all been invited to speak, not as heroes performing for cameras, but simply as people sharing what the experience had meant to them. Grigor, never a man of many words, kept his remarks short. I spent 20 years thinking the biggest dangers in the galaxy were the ones you could see coming: ships, weapons, enemies with clear faces. What I learned out there is that the most dangerous thing of all might be forgetting, letting an entire people simply vanish, because remembering them was inconvenient for someone more powerful. I'd rather spend the rest of my life remembering, even when it's hard, than live comfortably by forgetting. Dr. Nwosu spoke next, her voice steady and warm. I became a doctor to help the living. I never expected to help something that existed somewhere between living and remembering, but I think that work matters just as much, maybe more, because it reminds us that care doesn't end just because something doesn't fit neatly into the categories we're used to. Tomas, still young, still a little unsure of himself in front of large crowds, spoke briefly about the strange, fragmented language of the Hollow, and how learning to listen carefully, without assuming he already understood, had taught him more about communication than years of formal study ever had. Mira simply smiled when her turn came. I always believed this old ship had more to give, long after everyone else assumed she was finished. I'm glad I got to be there when she proved it. I hope people remember that lesson long after I'm gone. Don't be so quick to throw away something, just because it looks old and tired. Sometimes it's carrying more strength than anyone bothered to notice. Finally, Shaw stood before the gathered officers and guests, thinking carefully about what he wanted to say. We didn't go looking for a grand discovery. We went because someone had to answer a threat, and because Admiral Cole refused to let fear alone dictate our choices. What we found changed all of us, permanently. I think about the Threll often, about how easily their entire story could have vanished forever, erased not just from the universe, but from memory itself. I think about how close we came to simply accepting the Dominion's warning and staying away, the way they clearly hoped we would. I'm grateful, every day, that we chose otherwise, because sometimes the bravest thing a people can do isn't to fight the loudest or build the biggest fleet. Sometimes it's simply choosing to listen and to remember when everyone else has decided it would be easier to forget. As the small ceremony ended and the crowd slowly dispersed into the quiet evening air, Shaw walked once more toward the gleaming, restored hull of the Endeavour, now standing as a permanent symbol rather than a forgotten relic. He rested a hand against its cool metal surface, thinking of the 12 people who had flown it into the unknown, and the ancient, patient presence that had trusted them with a secret nobody back home had believed, until the proof became impossible to ignore. The old warship, once destined for the scrapyard, now stood as proof of something far larger than any single mission. That value was not always obvious at first glance, that courage could be found in the most unlikely places, and that even in the deepest, most forgotten corners of the galaxy, the truth, given enough patience and enough people willing to listen, would eventually find its way home.